This morning by the UFC.
In 2016, the UFC is sold for a staggering $4 billion, cementing its status as one of the most popular and profitable sports organizations on earth.
55,000 in attendance.
Is it a thrilling sport or a killing sport?
But back in 2004,
you had politicians trying to shut it down.
I'm not interested in running them out of business. I'm interested in running them out of New York.
And it was losing money.
The UFC was about $40 or $50 million in the hole.
Facing the grim reality of going under, UFC's owners dumped money into reality TV in a desperate and expensive bid to save their company.
$10 million is a huge risk to take.
The Ultimate Fighter reality show was like a Hail Mary for the UFC.
16 guys are going to live in a house and fight to get a contract with the UFC.
But combining savage warriors with the gimmicks of reality TV is like mixing oil and water.
We had to do ridiculous challenges that had nothing to do with fighting.
If we wanted chicken breast and broccoli, it took forever.
You asked for alcohol, I was there within half an hour.
I mean, it was literally like animals claiming their territory.
It was a disaster.
But an unforgettable winner-take-all fight in the show's live season finale can still make the desperate investment pay off.
Dana knew that if it failed, his job was gone, everyone's job was gone.
You know, I hate to use that old cliche, but everything changed.
Everybody and their brother was calling their neighbor, dude, you've got to see this.
The Ultimate Fighter helps transform a soft-spoken executive
we want to make this the Super Bowl of mixed martial arts
into the brazen face of the UFC.
Do you want to be a fighter?
And turns the UFC into a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut by bringing mixed martial arts into the mainstream.
I remember the quote, "It's going to be bigger than the NFL."
He's grabbing the hair. That is perfectly legal.
Despite its tell your friends about it brutality, by the mid-90s, MMA remains a little understood ugly stepchild of mainstream contact sports.
That's it.
Ultimate Fighting, it's in a cage, it's in an octagon, and it's like a combination of boxing.
The minute you say it's in a cage, you lose people's respect.
The UFC was a spectacle. It wasn't a sport. They had guys kicking people in the face, and it was no holds barred. I'm Mike Goldberg, known also as Goldie. I was the voice of the UFC for 19 years.
One man makes it his mission to prevent the UFC from ever going mainstream. The senior senator from Arizona.
John McCain said that the UFC was human cockfighting. Literally.
We don't let roosters engage in cockfighting. We don't allow human beings to go out in the street and engage in this kind of activity.
And I don't think he was wrong at the time, because it was a spectacle. It was, 2 men will enter the octagon, only one will leave.
Banned in North Carolina. Banned in Mississippi.
After McCain convinces 36 states to ban the UFC, the promotion's primary source of revenue walks away.
All of the cable distributors took the pay-per-view option off the table. And so the viewership just went, whew.
With no TV revenue and few places to legally hold live events, the UFC is near death. But in 2001, casino owners Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta tried to get the company off life support by changing the rules of the game.
Lorenzo said, we're not going to run away from regulation. We are going to embrace regulation. And he worked on the new unified rules of MMA. No more, none more of this. You can't do this anymore. And with the changes in the rules, the UFC became more fan-friendly, more user-friendly, if you will, because all of these things that made it human cockfighting no longer existed.
Along with these new rules, on February 23, 2001 at UFC 30, the Fertitta brothers also introduced a new, humble-sounding president.
Dana White, president of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Dana, congratulations on your first show. That's got to feel good.
Thank you very much, James. I appreciate it. We're very excited.
In a 2014 interview, Lorenzo reflects on the hiring decision.
Dana was the perfect fit because he has what you can't teach, which is an incredible drive and an incredible amount of common sense and the ability to understand people and understand the consumer.
Lorenzo pushed Dana into being the forefront, and Dana took it in great strides. My name is John McCarthy. Most people in the MMA world would know me as Big John McCarthy.
Let's get it on!
Referee for the UFC for 25 years. I always believed in the Fertittas and their ability to make anything gold.
The production quality just evolved massively. And the Fertittas and Dana wanted everything to be an event. They wanted it to be a show. I mean, they took it to a whole different level. The buildings we played, the marketing we had.
They put a lot of money into it. At one show, the fireworks cost them $100,000.
Everybody that's looking from the outside in, I mean, we thought everything was great. You know, everybody thought that the business was making a tremendous amount of money.
But little did we know that behind the scenes, because there wasn't any mainstream coverage of the UFC yet, that the UFC was about $40 or $50 million in the hole.
And that 40 to 50 million shortfall is just the start. As Lorenzo tells Graham Bensinger,
this could easily turn into $100 million real quick, because every single show we did, we were losing money on. And, you know, I could tell my brother was getting to the point where it was like, okay, this was fun, but it's not that fun.
Basically, 4.5, 5 years later, Lorenzo and Frank were looking to sell it.
Dana still talks about this moment as one of the toughest in his career.
Lorenzo said, I can't keep funding this thing. I need you to get out there and see what we can get for this thing. I started making calls.
And I think the best offer that Dana got back was, I believe, somewhere close to $7 million.
Lorenzo said, you know what? I don't think this is going to work out. We did our best. I'm going to sleep on it, but I think it's time to walk away from this.
The next morning, Lorenzo calls Dana back.
And he said, reality shows are very popular right now in all phases of TV, so why not try one with our guys?
I remember Dana did not like it. Because I hate reality TV.
Perhaps because early 2000s reality shows like American Idol, The Simple Life, and Fear Factor don't present a logical path to Dana, who is working to build a world-class MMA promotion. But the Fertittas get to call the shots.
They believe this is going to work, people are going to like it. This is what's going to change the sport. One thing I would give him is Dana's a great soldier. You know, as soon as Lorenzo puts his mark on it and says, this is what we're doing, he marches forward and he does exactly what he needs to do to make it work.
They call it The Ultimate Fighter and design it as a competition-style reality TV show with a unique prize for the winners.
16 guys are going to live in a house and fight to get a contract with the UFC.
It was going to be an elimination format with some sort of survivor-style challenges that played a little bit more into the athletic side of the fighters.
The last two survivors in each weight class will fight in a live finale to decide who wins the UFC contract. The hope is that by airing the show on TV, these live fights will attract a much bigger audience than a pay-per-view.
Very few people had pay-per-view, and millions and millions and millions had cable TV.
You know, a TV contract, especially back in those days, was incredibly important because we didn't have the avenues that we have today for streaming services. You know, pay-per-views, you had to pay to play, so to speak. So, you know, being able to have a broadcast partner that was going to, you know, support you, lift you up, and help with that marketing side was huge back in those days.
That was the solution to diversify away from pay-per-view. Free television, free television, free television. Get everybody interested in them, boom.
There's just one catch.
They had been all over town. They had talked to the major networks, CBS, NBC, and everybody sort of had the reaction of like, John McCain called it human cockfighting. There's, you know, blood all over the place. Nobody understands the sport. So we all pass. My name is Kevin Kay. I was the Senior Vice President of Production and Development at Spike TV in 2004.
Spike TV, a channel that targets young male viewers and already airs weekly WWE events, is still reluctant to get in the ring with MMA fighting.
There was a kid who was an intern at Spike who kept putting these VHSs on my desk saying, like, you gotta see this. This is what every kid at NYU is watching, and it's called the UFC. And I was like, yeah, get out of my office. And after, I don't know, a few weekends, I just took them home and I put them in. I just remember watching Hoist Gracie on UFC 1 and it just blew my mind. But there were a lot of things that were almost impossible to put on cable TV.
Kevin finally agrees to meet with Dana and Lorenzo.
And I was like, I can't sell it. It's a bloody canvas inside of a steel cage with people beating the living daylights out of each other. Executives above me, they would watch it and go like, are we gonna kill somebody here? So the naysayers were everywhere. Nobody wanted to do it. Dana got up and said, you know, you're out of your mind. This is gonna be the biggest thing. It's gonna be, I remember the quote, it's gonna be bigger than the NFL. And I was like, wow, that's ballsy. But I said, look, if you wanna come back, it'd be great to see you again. But we can't do anything with this.
Bleeding cash and with losses still piling up, Dana and the Fertittas decide to gamble even more on the UFC by pushing more chips into the pot.
You know, being 40 or 50 million down, I mean, that's a big number. It's a really big number. But the thing of it is if you're already in that deep and you have the passion and you believe, you've got to step out and you've got to go the extra distance. If you don't, you're never going to know what could have been. And sometimes that's a lot harder to live with than losing that kind of money.
Lorenzo called me and he goes, look, what if I pay for it? Is there a way for us to do it if we pay for it?
The Fertittas offer to put up the $10 million required to make The Ultimate Fighter for Spike TV.
Normally, when a television show is produced, producers go and pitch a network their idea, and the network says, we want to buy that. Here's a bunch of money to produce the show. But this series was not being funded by the network. This series was being funded directly by the owners of the UFC.
If you don't believe in your product, who's going to? You've got to push. And, you know, they took that chance.
The Ultimate Fighter reality show was like a Hail Mary for Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta.
$10 million is a huge risk to take on a television series out of your own pocket.
The pitch was $1 million an episode. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, what can you give me? And I was like, I can give you the time slot after WWE. What then was 8 million viewers leading in. And then it's up to you guys to make a show that they stick around for.
After buying the UFC for $2 million and installing Dana White as president, casino owners Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta begin leveraging their media and celebrity contacts in unsuccessful attempts to popularize their struggling promotion.
A lot of the things that they tried didn't work. Ads in magazines like Maxim and Playboy and things like that.
Carmen Electra was on the cover of Maxim magazine with a bunch of fighters. When I look at that cover today, I actually wonder how many people at the time could name all of the fighters who were on that cover with Carmen.
At the risk of chasing good money after bad, the Fertittas commit $10 million of their own money to produce The Ultimate Fighter, a reality show for Spike TV that will have 16 MMA fighters living and training together while competing for a single UFC contract.
Reality TV was just really kind of in that infancy of, you know, the build out of where it was really going to end up going.
The Ultimate Fighter is a submission attempt to mainstream the UFC. Still, the show's producers are optimistic.
We sort of recognized that the UFC was at a tipping point. My name is Scott Cooper. I was a field director and producer on season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter. It was growing in popularity. We're all thinking, this is probably going to really change the sport.
Like with any reality series, the biggest challenge is getting the right cast.
We were trying to figure out, like, is it most important that they're a great fighter, or is it most important that they're a great personality, because we're making a reality show? And so we just tried to mix them in.
So on action, we're going to start.
Immediately, you could just see all the different types of fighters from across the spectrum. You know, you have philosophical fighter over here. You got someone over here that just, you know, wants to bully people all the time. You have someone over here that's like, I like crushing skulls.
They had no clue what they were in for. No clue. I'm Shannon Knapp, and I started working at the UFC back in 2005. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of those guys coming off that show as they transitioned into the UFC. They didn't know how they were going to be portrayed, what they were going to do, and what this all meant to their careers.
All of us had that dream of being the first Ultimate Fighter, and, you know, we were going to be on TV. That was pretty cool.
Not only will the fighters be on TV, but they will train with two UFC legends, Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell.
These were guys that I looked up to. Like, these are two of the biggest names in the sport.
I'm Randy Couture, wrestler and mixed martial artist, and I was one of the coaches on season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter. This is it. All the other marketing ploys and facelifts and everything hadn't got us over the hump yet. We didn't know if it was going to work. None of those athletes knew. They were taking a huge risk and taking 3 months out of their life to come to Vegas and put themselves through the ringer, literally.
I didn't know much about reality shows, but I thought this was our shot, you know, to get on free TV. This is what we needed. This is important. I'm Chuck Liddell, known as the Iceman, former light heavyweight UFC champ, and coach on The Ultimate Fighter.
For many of the fighters, moving into the Ultimate Fighter house is also moving on up.
Wow. You know, coming from the trailer park, I'm like, this is a mansion.
It's like, oh my gosh, like, this is great. Unlimited food, unlimited alcohol.
But it quickly becomes clear there's a disconnect between those making the show and those appearing on the show.
The production crew and the producers, I don't think they really understood who or what we were as fighters. I am Bobby Southworth, cast member of The Ultimate Fighter. We don't call it season 1 because it was The Ultimate Fighter. Everything else is just an imitation.
We weren't really informed a whole lot about what the show was going to be, what exactly we were going to do. My name is Kenny Florian. I'm a 3-time UFC title contender, and I fought in the UFC from 2005 to 2011. Essentially, we were the guinea pigs, right? So they were kind of learning on the fly.
When we first arrived, the refrigerator was packed. It was filled with Hot Pockets. My name is Nathan Quarry, or Nate Rock Quarry, as I go by in the MMA world. I was on season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter. It was filled with stuff that college interns would buy, not professional athletes who are trying to refuel after these 2-a-day workouts.
If we wanted to get chicken breast and broccoli or something like that to the house, it took forever.
You asked for alcohol, I was there within a half an hour. Because they knew there was going to be some good TV. You get those guys loaded.
And the nutrition-starved, booze-fueled fighters don't disappoint.
One of the most memorable moments, especially early on, was Chris Lieben getting drunk and saying something about, like, he's going to sprinkle or spritz or something on Jason Thacker's bed.
Is he coming?
And I was like, he's not going to do that. And sure enough.
Oh, there he goes. Let's rub it in.
He did. Yeah, I mean, it was literally like animals claiming their territory.
Are you surprised? I mean, like, a bunch of fighters drunk at a house.
But the biggest drama happens off-screen between the show's producers looking to make good TV and the show's MMA trainers looking to make good fighters.
We had a lot of disagreements. You know, my job was to coach these guys, and their job is to make a reality show. And those two things don't always, they collide a little bit. They didn't really understand fighting very well at all. And they wanted them to work out twice a day, hard workouts, and I'm like, it's like, look, nobody works out 60 days in a row like that.
Some of those guys had never trained twice a day like that ever, and a lot of them were very sore and very beat up after those first couple weeks.
It is difficult enough to be around that many people day after day, but especially when you have no outlet whatsoever. We were not allowed books, no TV, no music. You're in pain all the time, you're sore, you don't know what the next day is going to bring.
What it often brings is contrived competitions, challenges that may work on reality shows like Survivor, but do little to enhance the credibility of the men on The Ultimate Fighter.
We were all winging it. We had to come up with all these physical challenges and tests.
The first one was carrying Randy and Chuck on a lounger over and under obstacles.
They're crazy. I was laughing the whole time watching these guys. Like, oh man, that's not fun.
Just ridiculous events that had nothing to do with fighting.
When the show's producers begin screening the footage, they have their own reason for hating the reality-style challenges.
Oh, this is boring. And we were, I don't want to say struggling, but just trying to figure out, like, what's the right chemistry that's going to engage the most amount of people and make a good TV show.
They eliminated a bunch of the challenges and a bunch of this other stuff and narrowed it down to what really mattered, the fighting.
We went through the first couple challenges, and then they told us, like, in 5 days, you guys are going to have to fight.
While the contestants griped about the challenges, they liked the new let the fighters fight direction even less.
At the beginning of the series, it was going to be all about challenges, and there wasn't going to be any fights until the end.
The contract even stated that we would go through these challenges, and then whoever was left, both 2 finalists in each weight class, would fight for the contract. But then they changed that.
Now the contestants will have to fight their way to the grand prize live finale. Bobby Southworth speaks up.
This is bullshit. They want us to fight for free. It just didn't seem right.
Bobby had gotten everybody all riled up.
I was going around telling everybody, don't talk, don't talk. We're all basically just gonna sit around with our thumbs up our asses, right? And not do anything and make it super boring.
Bobby was very adamant that nobody's gonna continue doing anything.
The reaction from the production crew, I think they were a little, like, everybody was really exasperated because nobody was saying anything. And I mean, it probably lasted for 6 or 7 hours, right? And then I think the production people called up Dana.
And so I think it's 9 o'clock at night or something. Get the call, all right, everybody get in the vans, we're going to the gym.
Dana wants to talk to all you guys.
In the gym, we're all lined up there. Here comes Dana. Dana was always kind of the looming threat because he's the one that really holds the key to your future in the sport of MMA. If he'd like you, he'd give you an opportunity, and if he didn't, well, then you'd be gone.
Gather around, guys. Get closer over here.
With $10 million and the future of the UFC riding on The Ultimate Fighter, this moment is a real test for the league president.
I have the feeling that some guys here that don't want to fight. I don't know what the everybody thought they were coming here for.
Then we get the infamous speech.
Do you want to be a fighter?
Faced with a mutiny by the Ultimate Fighter contestants, Dana White must become the UFC captain capable of putting it down.
It was interesting how we saw Dana White grow. If you ever go back and watch the interview he did very early on with James Wormy.
We want to make it more fan-friendly. We want to get the crowd involved in it.
Dana was skinny, soft-spoken. He was a little bit awkward at times, and all of a sudden, things changed.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question. Anybody who says they don't, I don't want you here. And I'll throw you the out of this gym so fast your head will spin.
And we were all like, holy shit, that guy is a star. He's a TV star.
Cool? Have a good night, gentlemen.
That's a moment in reality TV history that will never be replicated in another show. A moment that made great TV. And we had something special there.
Dana White became as popular a member of the cast as the fighters, as the Hall of Fame coaches, Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell. But that speech, do you want to be a fighter? That was that first seed that created the Dana White, the confident, brash Dana White that we know today.
But Dana's outburst about being a fighter only partially subdues the man who started the revolt.
I told him, Dana, that's why I'm here, is that I want to be in the UFC, but we don't want to fight for free. They came back to us and said, okay, we came up with the solution. You guys are going to fight, and if you finish the fight by KO or submission, you guys are going to get a $5,000 check. At the time, my biggest payday might have been like $10,000 or something like that. I mean, $5,000 for the fight, it seemed like a pretty good idea. And all the other guys as well, we all thought that, okay, that sounds like decent money. So everybody was into it.
Fighters turn into other people when they know that they're actually going to fight. As soon as they heard that there was going to be fighting, it's like, okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. Everything changed.
Fight! And then what happens? Bonner and Forrest end up in the sparring session, and they clash heads, and Bonner gets cut.
Dana, stitches. Can they say bad?
While Bonner's injury doesn't cut him from the show, Nate Quarry isn't so fortunate.
So we are all training in the octagon. We're doing some light MMA sparring.
And one of the guys went to take another guy down, smashed into Nate.
So I get 450 pounds of motion hitting my left leg, completely straightened out my foot, broke my ankle. I get limped out, put in an ambulance, taken to the doctor, and I was very upset. If you're injured, if you're cut, you can't continue, you're off the show.
The injury will take 6 weeks to heal. By then, the show and the UFC contract will be history.
I was in tears. Well, they've got the camera in my face saying, "What are you thinking?" I just looked at him, I said, "I'm thinking all my dreams just died." Is that what you want to hear? Is that going to be good television for you? The crew is telling me, "You don't understand, you're going to be this huge star. Everybody's going to love your character and the way you're portrayed on the show." And I'm like, this isn't a character, man. This is my life. And I think this is one of the big differences between your average reality show and The Ultimate Fighter. They're just random people that happen to get on that show. This is my job. This is my career. This is my future.
Starting with UFC 12, the promotion instituted weight classes. But after weeks of free food and booze, Bobby is tipping the scales way above his class.
I was 227, and I had to cut 22 pounds to make 205 pounds. I think it was 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and I had to make the weight by 2 o'clock the next day.
I was at the gym the night Bobby had to cut 20 pounds before his fight. Now, to me, this seemed like heroic. This did not seem like something that's possible to an ordinary person.
We locked him in the sauna. Just stay in there. It was gnarly. I was fainting and passing out from trying to make the weight.
The weight loss drama makes for great TV, especially when Bobby wins by scoring an Ultimate Fighter first.
It's definitely a feather in the cap to get to be the first primetime fight and to get the first knockout.
After 8 weeks of filming, 4 contestants have fought their way to the finale, which will air live on Spike TV after all the taped episodes air. Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner, Diego Sanchez, and Kenny Florian each have a chance to win the grand prize, a 6-figure UFC contract. As contestants head home, the producers head to a screening room.
I was scared to death when I watched the tapes. Like, what are we going to be able to make out of these hundreds of hours of footage? We were sort of skirting a line of, is it okay to do this? How far are we going to push this? We've already got fighting. Now we have people peeing on each other's beds. Is it cohesively going to stand together as a television show?
After months editing the show, it's finally ready to air. For Dana and the Fertittas, it's now time to find out if their $10 million gamble to make MMA mainstream by putting it on free TV pays off. For the Spike TV executive who greenlit the show, it's time to see if he still has a job.
If this doesn't work, my head was on the chopping block.
So many people put so much work into making this series happen over months. These fighters went through hell. People have laid out millions and millions of dollars of their own money, hoping that this, works out. And then when it's going to air, you don't know what's going to happen.
On this season of The Ultimate Fighter.
January 17th, 2005, The Ultimate Fighter premieres on Spike TV, introducing the UFC to a brand new cable TV audience. 1.67 million viewers tune in, more than double the network's break-even target.
The show blew up when it aired. It blew up like crazy.
I just remember looking at those ratings and going like, holy shit. That's what I was hoping for, but I never thought it would happen.
Dana said it's a Trojan horse to get on TV. It's a way to get the sport out there to the public.
I absolutely loved it. I loved the antics. I loved the setup. And I'd called, oh my gosh, at least 50, 60 UFCs by that point. Even for me, it was eye-opening. It gave me an opportunity to meet these guys in a way that nobody had ever met them before. And I could feel the buzz that was created by being on free TV and proving to the world that these men take mixed martial arts very seriously.
Ratings climb further for the episode where a backyard confrontation between Bobby Southworth
Talk you fatherless bastard. You.
and Chris Lieben ultimately requires some home repairs.
And that, I think, ultimately is, what made the show. If we hadn't had that mix of guys with those different skills and those different personalities, it's probably just another TV show.
These guys, it was just caution to the wind. They were in it to win it and have a good time. And I think that is really what separates this cast from the future cast and what made that show so good. You've got this great energy, this great story that's just organically happening.
The show quickly turns the 16 previously unknown MMA fighters into celebrities.
So the UFC brings us down for one of the UFC pay-per-views to sign autographs. And we walk into a room where all of the fans were already there waiting for us. I remember seeing the entire crowd turn to face us and hearing them say, "Oh my God, it's them." And I was like, it's us? Is that a thing? And I thought to myself, man, I am so cool. I'm on the poster and I'm signing my autograph.
One of the things when it comes to promoting is making stars. You've got to be able to make stars because, they build a fan base that has to watch them. They're invested. A star makes people want to buy tickets, buy merchandise, tune in, and just follow along. And these guys coming off that show, they were stars. Everybody cares. Everybody wants to see what comes next.
What comes next is something Senator John McCain once tried so hard to prevent. The UFC being broadcast live on cable TV like it was any other professional sport.
We've come a long way. This feels big. There was a lot more lights, a lot more cameras.
I didn't know what to expect, but I did know that I knew all these fighters better than any fighters I had called previously. I knew them by watching The Ultimate Fighter as a fan.
The night culminates in the show's finalists battling for a spot in the UFC, starting with middleweight contenders Diego Sanchez versus Kenny Florian.
Diego Sanchez and I, we were on the same team. We were both on Team Chuck Liddell. And I felt like I had given Diego probably the most difficult challenge, especially when it came to grappling. We were kind of the best grapplers on the team, in my opinion. This is it.
4 months in that house, I was like, I worked so hard. I'm there in the final. I'm almost achieving the goal and the dream, the vision. I'm going to do this. I'm going to become the UFC champion.
Diego could fight. His ground game was solid. He was a very good grappler. It's going to be a hard fight for Kenny.
Kenny, he was real small for the show, but tough. He's a very smart fighter, very good technical fighter.
I remember getting out into the octagon and like hearing the crowd, feeling that energy. That was by far the biggest crowd I'd ever fought in front of. I remember looking at Diego and he came out there, he's like all like intense and like, you know, mean faces. And I was like, but we like used to train together. Like, why is he so worked up? Like, wow, like that kind of got to me a little bit. And then I was literally just vibrating inside, shaking. I could not control it. Just felt like everything was going a mile a minute. Like it was happening so fast. And before I knew it, he ended up taking me down, got on top of me, and he's punching me. All of a sudden I'm bleeding. It's like someone put a red curtain over my eyes and I could not see. And the fight was over.
What's scheduled as a 3 5-minute round fight is over less than 3 minutes into the first.
I went through Kenny Florian like it was nothing.
It's a speedy win for Diego, but short is not necessarily sweet for cable TV. Dana and the Fertittas need the fights to last long enough to fill the show and avoid disappointing both viewers and their partners at Spike TV.
I can only imagine, you know, the first reality show and you're into this finale and you got to figure out how to stretch this and stuff and things are going quick. I'm sure there was a little bit of panic for Dana and them.
UFC's biggest night now relies on Stephan Bonnar and Forrest Griffin delivering a memorable payoff to the Ultimate Fighter. Another quick, forgettable fight could mark the end of the TV show and the league.
Dana knew that if it failed, his job was gone, everyone's job was gone, and Lorenzo was out a lot of money.
After a bloody but otherwise underwhelmingly short fight between Kenny Florian and Diego Sanchez, the pressure is now on Stephan Bonnar and Forrest Griffin to put on a show.
You never knew what you were going to get with Stephan Bonnar. He was a little bit crazy, a little bit wild.
Forrest only had one speed. It was on and off. All go or nothing. I don't think any of us had any idea how it was going to go down.
Here we go. They just literally bit down on their mouthpieces and they threw bombs.
Wow, big right hand. These guys are swinging.
And man, what a brawl.
I mean, they just went at it. It was just such a great back and forth fight.
So evenly matched.
And they were both willing to leave everything in the octagon that night for that six-figure contract.
I just remember watching that fight and thinking, this is extraordinary. It's as good as it gets. Fans were like, oh my God, this is like the best thing I've ever seen. We need to tell our friends.
Everybody and their brother was calling their neighbor, dude, you've got to see this.
By the third round of Bonnar versus Griffin, the audience grows to 3.3 million.
The ratings just went through the roof.
That fight was so unexpected. I really thought it would go like a round or two.
These guys are literally giving it everything they have here.
Man, the guts they showed, the stamina they showed. I don't think we'd ever witnessed anything that was so intense for a full 15 minutes as we did with Forrest and Stephan.
What is keeping these guys going? Bloodied, battered, but neither can be beat.
All tactics and technique seemed to just go out the window and let's just see who the last man standing is. And guess what? They were both standing at the end of that.
What a battle of wills. I would hate to have to score this fight.
When the fight is over, it's anyone's guess who should get the victory and the six-figure contract.
I remember Joe and I saying, this is too good of a performance. How can somebody be a loser in this fight?
It was just such a great fight to have as our first live, a fight on TV. It was pretty amazing.
Probably the fight of the decade and maybe one of the most important fights in our sport.
That's not lost on Dana and the Fertittas, who are openly congratulating each other cageside as the fighters await the decision.
So the end of the fight comes, and we're waiting for Bruce Buffer to, deliver the official decision.
By unanimous decision,
Much of the crowd isn't happy and boos the decision. But Dana has a surprise for them.
1 second here. Frank, Lorenzo, and I have gotten together and we've decided there is no loser in this fight. And we're going to offer Stephan Bonnar a 6-figure contract with the UFC.
After the heart and soul that they both poured out, to step up and say, you know what, no, both of you are getting contracts. I think that was the right thing to do. And I think that drew a lot more fans and a lot more people to The Ultimate Fighter in general.
The last Ultimate Fighter bout is so compelling it overshadows the star-studded main event between the legendary Ken Shamrock and Rich Franklin.
I was there when Rich and Shamrock went in for the main event. People started leaving. They didn't care about Rich and Shamrock, but they knew Stephan and they knew Forrest. How much more interesting is a fight when you know the person's story? And that's what people got to see with The Ultimate Fighter.
We all were just like, holy shit, did that just happen? That fight was so good that we were like, I have to do it again.
That night, Spike TV commits to airing future UFC fight nights, as well as making the next season of The Ultimate Fighter.
Dana came out and said, how great was that? Let's make it season 2. And we were like, oh yeah, we already agreed on that. We already shook hands and wrote it down on a napkin.
For the guys that won the first contracts, I think that things worked out pretty well for them. Stephan Bonnar, he had a great career and I was always a fan. Obviously, Forrest was successful. He won the light heavyweight championship. Kenny and Diego both had long, successful careers. The Ultimate Fighter changed a lot for a lot of people.
Previously on The Ultimate Fighter. And it's still on the air 31 seasons later. The Ultimate Fighter has come a long way from the cheesy reality show challenges and low-budget look of its first season, and continues to draw millions of fans, old and new.
I don't think any of us had any idea that this show was going to be the smashing success that it was, and that it was going to change the landscape for the sport. And all these other promotions that are in the sport now probably wouldn't be here if that show wasn't successful.
While still not surpassing the NFL as Dana White once predicted, the UFC is now valued at over $11 billion. The Fertittas cashed out in 2016, but Dana still runs what's become the biggest combat sports promotion in the world.
Spike would never have grown to what it was without the UFC, and the UFC would never have grown to what it is without Spike.
If you ask, would the UFC have survived? I believe the UFC would have survived, but it would not have taken off in the fashion that it did.
That decision to make The Ultimate Fighter is one of the defining moments of my career. For all the criticism, for all the people who weren't crazy about it, for all the people who thought like, it's just a blood sport. It was like, wow, we proved them all wrong. And it was extraordinary.